taken by helicopter from Roots, and to whom you presented the presentation as it then existed on the particular day that we're talking about?
Whatever the presentation was I was showing, I would have obviously spoken to that, and my understanding at that time, I can't recall obviously what I told them. It would have been the whole presentation, and speaking to each slide again, I could have said to them that the 1330 came and it was time to put the tactical fit plan forward, but again I'm speculating now.
You remember the date upon which this presentation was made?
No, that's why I say I think it's late in the first week.
Late the first week. So we could more or less, I know it's 1 o'clock, so we must stop soon, but I take it might be possible for us, or for you, to identify with reference to the various slides that were found in your computer, at what stage of the presentation this took place and what precisely these people were told. But it does sound as if unless the time pressure point was contained in the presentation as it then existed, it's not something that would have been conveyed to the panel. Is that correct?
Yes, that makes sense.
Oh, thank you. Can we convenient, Mr. Nsibeza, if we take the lunch adjournment now?
I will know, Bruce.
But before we do that, my colleague Advocate Hemmerich wants to say something.
Mr. Semenya, is it not possible to get some clear details about the meeting alluded to instead of the speculation?
Yes, we also made the observation we might need to find more information on that meeting.
Mr. Nsibeza, you haven't. With your permission, may I take the lunch adjournment now?
Yes, you may.
Thank you, Mr. Nsibeza. We'll take the lunch adjournment. We'll try to
Time, your busy schedule, this, that.
No, it was very informal.
Very informal.
Yes.
Testify that they need time, your busy schedule, this. Testify that they needed the policy, or the policies of the police to be brought together, to be looked at. Time, your busy schedule, this, that.
No, it was
very informal.
Yes.
Now, when you testify that they needed the
for the terms of reference for this commission, and I was coming to bring them the presentation to show them. So, but I'm sure that can be clarified. As I say, if there's some document that would have sanctioned that group of people or that meeting, it would have been mentioned in that.
I know you're saying that is what you thought, but do you have a basis for having thought that this was the purpose of the exercise?
Do I have a basis for?
For having testified that your understanding was that those people whom you were making a presentation to,
given that in his directive, for the terms of
obviously the operation to be weighed,
given that in his directive, for the terms of reference for this commission,
appears against those policies.
Given that in his directive, for the terms of reference for this commission, and I was coming to bring them. I hear you.
Yes.
But like I'm saying, I know, given that in his directive, for the terms of reference for this commission, and I was coming to bring them the presentation to show them. So mention their backgrounds, which is strong in the pop, but I'm sure that can be clarified. So I couldn't think of any other reason, but I'm sure that can be clarified. As I say, if there's some document that would have sanctioned that group of people or that meeting, it would have been mentioned in that. Brief them, other than that would be their role. But I'm sure that can be clarified. As I say, if there's some document that would have sanctioned that group of people or that meeting, it would have been mentioned in that. Their role. Briefing at Roots when the National Commission was briefed. They gave input, so
that was after this gathering you're telling us about now.
Yeah.
This was the end of Roots, was it?
Yes, it was probably the second last day. Somewhere there.
And did you, at that stage, present to the National Commissioner Exhibit L as it then existed?
Yes.
The presentation as then existed?
Yes.
And two of the people to whom you presented it earlier, in an earlier edition, I take it, or were there any changes between your going to Pretoria and the presentation to the National Commissioner?
Yes. From what I can see, in the one marked as HQ, there are changes to the one that the National Commissioner. Yes.
And then two of the people to whom you made your presentation earlier then spoke as well.
Yes.
Effectively spoke to the National Commissioner and those present.
Well, there was a huge amount of people. It was about 40-odd people sitting around a huge U-shaped type.
And did you...
sign. But I am aware that there are other personnel who, for instance, are not there, who were also part of the JOC. I think of the intelligence people, Brigadier Engelbrecht. There were some of the public order policing commanders from Gauteng that were there on the Wednesday who are not depicted here at this time. So I'm not sure if that's just from the 16th possibly.
And as you testified about, for instance, the provincial commissioner, she would have been one of those people who would not be reflected in these exhibits, even though she was at one time or another at the JOC.
Yes, and I think that's possibly due to she did not have a pertinent role to play. She was more oversight, and therefore she didn't have a call sign or radio or was involved in any such way.
I see, yeah. And I understood your evidence to be that you don't recall exactly what times she was at the jock. Do you?
No. As I say, she was in and out.
Yeah.
But difficult. At the 13th, I mean, there are certain times that I can recall her being there, but not throughout the 3-day process with any specifically accurate reference.
Are you able to remember? I don't want to text you if you don't. Are you able to remember if she was there on the 16th?
She was there on the 16th.
And
I'm sorry, Mr. Bez, may I interrupt just to, in the hope of making things a bit clearer. If one turns to slides 67 and 68 of Exhibit L, now admittedly this reflects the position as it was on Tuesday, but I'm not sure it's only confined to Tuesday. Slide 67 deals with what's described as the command cell. And slide 68 deals with the JOCOM representatives. Now, as I say, that was the position as of Tuesday, but was that only Tuesday, or did it continue into Wednesday and to some extent into Thursday?
It was a continuation, Chairperson.
Now, in order to work out who was in the JOCOM, or who was supposed to be in the JOCOM, do we look at slide 68?
It's a combination of 68 and 67 as well.
All right. Perhaps you can, the ground having been cleared a little bit for you, Mr. Sibeza, perhaps you can now proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So there wouldn't be anywhere really where the presence of the provincial commissioner at the JOG would be reflected.
Other than possibly in minutes, no.
Now, you know, of course, that there is the critical moment about which you have testified, and I'm not going to go over that. And that would be between something to 4 until the end of the operations, when we now know that during that period, people died, people got injured, and all of that. Now, I know you say she was there on the 16th. You wouldn't know, even if you tried very hard to think, whether she was there at the time that the shootings took place.
I don't recall her being there at that time. But again, I was positioned next to the radio and listening quite carefully as well as I could to trying to picture what was going on in that scenario that was unfolding. So, but I do remember talking to her later that afternoon, and I would think it was probably around the 5 o'clock area. But again, I'm not saying she wasn't there earlier. I just remember speaking to her at that stage, because the reports were coming in then about the amount of deceased or wounded, which at first were highly exaggerated. And then obviously I was talking to her specifically about that.
If I could press you a little bit there. I mean, she's a police commissioner. She's the head of the police in the Northwest. You are all there. If at the time that there were reports of bodies down, this, that, and the next thing, coming through to the JOG, deficiencies in radio communication notwithstanding, if the whole head of the provincial SAPS was there, it's not one of those things you would forget.
Well, again, I think it depends what you're concentrating on at that time. And I know until there was a lull in the operation, which was probably till about 20 past 4, my focus was on trying to understand what was going on outside. But in saying that, again, she's not somebody that I would report to. If I was reporting on anything there, I would have normally gone to General Annandale to discuss an issue if I had a concern, or I know I've speaking to the provincial commissioner later, but that was now regarding, I remember pacing up and down inside the actual jock at some stage later in the operation when numbers were coming through on the amount of deceased and so on, like I say, which were highly exaggerated at first to be more than double of what we know now.
I mean, just there really are protocols. And I mean, she's Lieutenant General and Annandale is Major General. So, whilst I don't deny that you were reporting to Major General Annandale, she's the type of person in her position who, when she entered the place and you were there, you would, whatever you were doing, you would stand and salute and all that kind of thing. Is that not it?
I don't think in the context of what was happening there that, I mean, the general's in and out. When you've greeted her at the beginning of the day, you don't continue to greet her every time. And then she moves freely within the environment. So once you've done your protocol greetings of saluting or showing her the necessary respect, and she's within your environment, it's not a continual thing that you'll do each time she will enter a room, for instance. So no, and not within the context of the operation that was going on. As I say, I think people are very concentrated on what's going on.
Maybe I don't understand. How big is this place called the Jock? Is it a room? Is it a room the size of this auditorium, for instance?
I would estimate it at being probably 10 meters long by about 5 to 8 meters wide.
And that would accommodate a fair number of people, but it's not the kind of place where if somebody was present you would not be able to notice, however busy you were, may I suggest?
Well, again, how many people were in the Jock that day? I can only estimate maybe 15, 20 or more. So
you would pick up a Major General, a Lieutenant General, a female Lieutenant General. You would pick her up if she was there, you would.
As I'm telling you, the time that I remember seeing her was the time I actually went up to her, and I noticed her pacing up and down inside, and that's when I went and spoke to her. But I don't recall seeing her before that.
And when was that, by the way?
That was about, again, I'm speculating, but it's around about the 5 o'clock time.
So there was a time when she was there. When was this that you recall for certain that she was there?
She was there at the 13:30 meeting, the special JOCOM meeting.
Yes.
At the briefing.
Were you aware of her departure?
No, but I'd also departed.
Yes.
I was at the front, so. And on returning, I don't recall seeing her. But again, I was obviously tasked, as I've picked up from my telephone records, I was tasked with media issues and finding out certain things from Brigadier Carlitz, and then we went straight into the actual operation, and the radio was abuzz.
Yes.
So.
And I mean, if she was there during the time of the shootings, because you are under oath and it's your lifestyle, you wouldn't conceal that from the commission.
No. And that's why I'm saying I didn't actually take note or see her. It's not to say that she wasn't there.
Now, when you see her later on, what was her reaction to the deaths?
Well, she was concerned.
Tell us.
Say again?
Tell the commission.
I said she was concerned.
Yes.
So, and this is why I say, because the initial amounts that were reported into the JOC were bloated. There was, I think they were talking, I think they may have combined the wounded with the deceased when somebody gave the numbers through instead of separating them. But they were initially given through as deceased, and somebody mentioned something around 76. And then it was clarified. And I remember speaking to it at that stage.
She's been widely reported as having said this thing is going to end today.
Yes,
I'm paraphrasing her.
Yes, I understand. That was shown in the ETV footage.
Did she then...
Chair. all of this is interesting, but it is way outside the lines indicated for cross-examination by Seri.
That sounds correct, Mr. Nzibeza. What do you say about it? I mean, the reaction of the provincial commissioner to these figures, is that something that's going to help us to make our findings in respect to the issues that we have to make findings on? And anyway, is it covered by your request, which is filed by Seri on behalf of your clients, to cross-examine on this matter? I don't think so.
Chairman, let me answer the first question, Chairman. And the first question is whether it would assist the Commission if we got answers. I'm trying to probe whether the Commissioner, the Commissioner of Police, Provincial Commissioner, who is recorded earlier as having said this thing is going to end today, whether when she comes into the joke, she says, and I hope not, I told you this thing is going to end today. So I just want to explore that, because
the question is that covered by the request to cross-examine? I don't think so. But anyway, how does it help us? At the end of the day, we will find, I hope, with your assistance and the assistance of your colleagues, what happened, what went wrong, and insofar as we can, why. But the reaction of the provincial commissioner when she came back into the dock, or sometime later when the witness first saw her, is that going to help us?
Mr. Chairman, I would argue, and I will leave it at that, Mr. Chairman. If I'm being,
leave it. If you're going to leave it at that, leave it at that. Let's move on, shall we? I'd like to take the tea adjournment at 3 o'clock, which gives you 4 minutes before tea, if you want to use it.
On this point?
No, not on this point. On another point.
Mr. Chairman, can we take the tea adjournment so that I can readjust my thinking?
Very well, we'll take the tea adjournment.
Good attempt. Nice try. But what about this? That's a good one.
That stuff I prepared for you?
That's right. We didn't expect this kind of revelation, did we? You didn't answer. What is it? Written in
order policing operations, and as part of a research which she was conducting, and she uses a very interesting phrase, into the transformation of public order policing in South Africa. You've seen that, have you?
Yes.
Yes. And she mentioned who had given her that permission, and then she says the book that her research culminated in a book, Transforming the Robocops, Changing Police in South Africa, which was published by the UKZN Press in 2005. Are you aware of the book?
No.
You are not aware of the book. But she does say particularly in paragraph 6, and I will ask you questions with regard thereto. She says during this period there were approximately 15,000 residents in the Cleveland's hostel, majority of whom were armed. In your own experience of that part of the world, as a police officer, are you aware of those phenomena? Armed members of the ANC and members of the IFP staying at Cleveland's hostel?
My experience with regard to that is the 1993 situation, which unfortunately took place in the Tekoza Vosloorus area, where I was deployed for 3 months. Similarly, where the ANC and the IFP were in contesting with each other, unfortunately with violence.
Yes, that would have been the pre-election
yes.
Sort of violence. But you wouldn't necessarily, you are not contesting the veracity of these facts. It's just that you say you don't know about them.
Obviously I don't know about them, yes.
Yeah. Now, there is something here where I would like to get your comment on, and that is in paragraph 7 of her statement. She says during the period of her investigation there had been 50 murders that had been committed in the hostel, in sort of these tit-for-tat violence. In other words, there had been, as I understand the argument, there had been a cause for concern about the level of violence in the place. It had resulted into 50 murders. Did you see that?
I see that, yes, over a period of 2 years.
Yes, and then she says approximately 40 POP members were stationed at the hostel. I'll come to that when I summarize what I think are the points that she makes. And he says they were full-time on the 24-hour basis. Now, in your experience in POPs, do you know that this sometimes is the practice, where in volatile areas you have POP members stationed on a 24-hour basis?
Well, the POP, in essence, as the unit is stationed on a 24-hour basis, the members would obviously be working shifts in that environment.
Yes.
Whether they're static or, for that matter, whether they're a roaming patrol in a troubled area, same type of scenario.
Right. Now, what I find interesting in the context of what you are about, and as I say, this is a sworn statement, and I would like to get your views about it, whether in terms of your own experience is something that you're aware of. Paragraph 8 says, at the time of the Cleveland's operations, POP members did not carry automatic rifles in operations, although these were stored in locked safes within the armored vehicles, ready for use in an emergency situation. Members did, however, carry sidearms issued to every member to be used in self-defense. Hostel dwellers did shoot live ammunition at POP members, but POP members never retaliated with live ammunition. The POP response would be to stand their ground, advance on the hostel dwellers, and saturate with stun grenades, rubber bullets, and tear gas. Now, what would be your reaction and comment on that?
I think that the scenario that's being sketched here is pretty vague, because it's not saying from where the attack emanates. It could be from inside a hostel through a window, shooting at the POPs members down below. Because I cannot think that there would be a policeman that would stand and have somebody meters in front of him fire at him and not retaliate even with his pistol, because his life would be in imminent danger. So I don't dispute that live rounds were fired, because you would hear the sounds of live rounds being fired for that matter. But I also do not see the death of any policeman mentioned here either, which means that I don't think the threat is made out to be the equivalent of the threat that the members at Marikana were facing.
Do I understand from that last remark that POP members do react in a different way, especially if a police officer has been killed?
No, what I'm saying is that if a POP member's life is in imminent danger and he can identify the threat, that he's legally, he's gained the legal grounds in order to defend himself.
See, for instance, here he talks about that situation. 15,000 people staying there, and they are known to be that number. And a decision taken to contain the violence, which is known to the police to be responsible for 15 murders. And I know comparisons are odious. Yeah, up to and until the 16th of August, we were talking of how many? 6 deaths, 10 deaths at the most.
Yes.
And it seems to me that if we take what Monique Mark says, the fact that there were 50 murders that had been committed did not call for the kind of reaction that we now know in terms of your plan was the reaction.
I think one
Chair, the question is objectionable. There is nothing to suggest that the police action on the 16th was in reaction to the deaths that occurred the Monday.
To answer to that objection, Mr. Beza?
No. Mr. Chairman, I was not suggesting that this was so. The question was premised on a reaction from the witness who apparently in an analogous fashion had said one doesn't know the context of what the witness is saying. I mean, of what the deponent to the affidavit is saying about the levels of violence there. For instance, no policeman had been killed. Now, I'm seeking to put to Colonel Scott, and he seems to understand where I'm getting at, that here in this affidavit, we have been given a picture of 50 murders that had taken place, 15,000 people, hostel dwellers. But where she makes the case that the reaction was not to bring people with armed rifles. The reaction all the time was rifles may be there, locked away in cabinets, but POP people to contain whatever violence may have led to 50 deaths. They can use firearms for their self-defense. I'm simply saying.
Yes, but what specific question do you want to ask based upon those facts which are set out, or allegations which are set out in the affidavit?
No, the question is whether, and may I put the question to the Colonel, wasn't in these circumstances an overreaction on the part of SAPS or of your plan to deal with that situation as it was up to that date, when it appears there are other methods that would have been applied to achieve the same result?
How do you respond to that?
I think in some ways the analogy is being made between this 2-year period that Ms. Marks observed versus the Marikana period or incident, and how they dealt with it there and how we dealt with it at Marikana. And in some ways, if I understand, to say that Marikana is not unprecedented. But in saying this, when you have 50 murders that have occurred over a 2-year period, and let's even be graceful and say maybe it could have been over a year period if she's saying from 98 to 99. The intensity that we were dealing with at Marikana, in essence, if we're going to talk statistics on murders, we're looking at an average of 2 a day before the 16th. So when we bring that into the math of the same period of only a year, we would be talking 730 murders, not 50 murders.
I'm not quite sure, follow the arithmetic. There were 10 people who died, who were murdered, or certainly met their death through violence. 2 of them were policemen, and the other 8 were civilians. And that's over a period from the it's the Saturday,
from the Saturday to the Tuesday.
To the Tuesday.
Yes.
No, so that's 4 days.
Yes, and of the 10.
So 2 a day. It's 2.5 days.
Yes.
2.5 per day. Yeah.
Yes, and as I
Although
said,
in fact, it's a little bit more complicated, but the basic thrust is the number is the rate, the death rate is significantly higher than appears to be in the case.
Which I'm just trying to say is the intensity of what's going on is far different to a period of over a year where there are 50 murders, which is, so in essence, and what I was just trying to say is that the vagueness of the statement of Ms. Marks is not stating a specific incident in detail like we have obviously on the 16th of Marikana. To say there are 15,000 people dwelling there, it's not to say that 15,000 people were at loggerheads with each other and aggressive either. So there's too much, it's too ambiguous in a sense to try to relate, to say, because I can go deeper into statistics for that matter in the same way. We can start bringing up other issues of intent that the police perceived, the muti, etc., which is not mentioned again in the statement by Ms. Marks. So if she says that the police says they were fired upon, was that incidentally because they heard something once? Did it happen on numerous occasions? How did the police respond to that? Because as I know, police members, to go charging forward with only shields and batons or with stun grenades and you're being fired upon with live fire, it just doesn't make sense either.
Yeah, thank you. Perhaps it's because one was not seeking to read line by line. For it's incorrect to say these 50 meters took place over a period of 2 years. She says so in so many words in paragraph 7. It was in over a 6-month period. Between November 1997 and July 1998, there were approximately 50 murders committed in the hostel. So it's 50 murders in 6 months.
I'm sorry, Mr. Supervisor. November to July sounds to me like 9 months.
9?
Yeah, November to July. And even if you start at the very end of July and you take it to the beginning of the end of November, beginning of December, and you take it to the end of June, beginning of July, it's then 7 months.
Yes.
But 7 to 9, it's not 6. Unless, of course, you knock off the Christmas period because everyone was on holiday.
Well, on that strict arithmetic calculation, it's certainly not 2 years. I think that's the point we were seeking back. Let's be generous and say over a period of, say, 8 months, that would be an average of 6 murders a month. Just the kind of murders that had taken place up to the 13th in the context.
Not quite right. 6 a month is just over 1 a week. The point the witness was making that we had, even if you leave the peace ones out, you've got a matter of 8 over 4 days, which is significantly higher rate than the number you've suggested now. But it's a question of degree, of course, isn't it?
Yes. No, it's just, Mr. Chairman, what I was indicating is that 2 years should not really be the period that he says is incomparable. So it's in that context that he says the operations there, you see, before the operation began, just like here, 50 murders had taken place. That's what she says in paragraph 7. And yet, according to her, when the operation began, notwithstanding that there had been that, and she said the matters took place because there were these violent clashes, ANC on the one hand, IFP on the other. And it happened in the hostel. It's not just murders that were taking place all over Cleveland it was in the hostel where they would confront each other in the square. You read that?
Yes.
In a very combative way. So these were warring entities. It was factional fighting. Now, I think the point she's making here is that the situation was volatile, but the reaction by law and order instruments or institutions was not to send people with R1 and R5 rifles. Do you see that as a fair assessment? Whether she's right or not, but would that be a fair assessment of what she says?
What she's speaking to, and you've noticed that there would be a group of 100 or more POP members on immediate standby that could respond. Now, I was based in the Durban Special Task Force, which coincidentally was located at the Public Order Policing Unit in Durban at that time. And they had at that time what is known as a reaction unit. And the reaction unit responded with the same armament that the Special Task Force has when they go out to work. So it's very likely that the response to any major incident when the public order policing members were coming under some form of life-threatening danger was going to be the reaction unit, because that's who got deployed at that time. So this is why I say it would be interesting to understand more fully what Ms. Marks is saying. I just feel her statements may be a bit short and vague, yes, and not as to the point, because one would need to speak to specific operations. And in saying what I'm saying, and I understand that the Commission hears that the public or the policemen were shot at with live ammunition at times and didn't retaliate. When I was in Katlehong, Vosloorus, over the period of 1993, I was a young new task force member, and at that stage had limited exposure to confrontational situations, both in the short time I was at POPs as well as on the station. So it's something to hear someone shooting at you and you come away and nothing's happened, and you actually count that. You actually start counting it as in, that's happened the third time, fourth time. Within 2-3 weeks there, I'd stopped counting it. It happened so many times. And that is something that I remember quite clearly. And not once that I retaliated to being shot at either. Because it's a matter of being shot at. You hear it happening, you don't know where it's coming from, and there's nothing you can do about it. You're just glad that you're still there and you're still alive and nobody else is hurt either. And I feel the context they're speaking to here is very much the same. I don't see deceased policemen. I don't see policemen retaliating to gunfire, because they obviously didn't particularly know where it was coming from either. And that would be the best that I could explain what is happening here.
Now, I did indicate to you that this will be a hotly contested area, but really it's just to get some comments or reaction from you. She seems to be suggesting, and I'll put it no higher than that, if I summarize, she seems to suggest that there was a successful containment by SAPS of that kind of violence involving 15,000 people in the context of 50 murders having taken place, by using the following methods, and she mentions a number. She says, for instance, SAPS were able to successfully contain violence by using less than lethal equipment. They used to carry sidearms but no rifles. I've already. And then she says they use a variety of, in quotes, saturation and surprising tactics, in particular surprise search and seizure operations to find and seize weapons. Perhaps let me state there.
Sorry, Mr. President, I've got a problem with this affidavit. I don't understand the key sentence you rely on. And that is the last sentence, I think, paragraph 12. POP succeeded in containing the violence during this period, and not a single person was killed by the police. Well, they contained the violence to the extent that they only limited the number of killings to 50. And the hostel was known as the hostel of death during that period. She does go on to say, of course, that not a single person was killed by the police. So the police contained the violence to the extent mentioned, and no one was killed by the police. I don't understand what the phrase succeeded in containing the violence during this period means, unless it means only kept the numbers down to 50. It's a pity we haven't got her book. Yeah. Possibly you could get a copy and present it to the STF so they can put it in their library and the Colonel can read it, but perhaps also to the local POP people as well. Yeah. But and maybe the book contains more detail which will explain the problem that I raised. But at the moment, in the absence of clarity as to what that phrase means, I'm not quite sure what value should be attached to this affidavit, except for one point, which seems to be an important point she makes, which is in line with Standing Order 262, to which you referred, and namely that always the overall commander of the operation was a member of POP, and at no point did other SAPS units operate independently of the command of POP. Now that's obviously an important point which is relevant here, but the other point I've got difficulty with, I'm sorry to put it to you in this way, but in order for me to follow the cross-examination, I'd like to know what that phrase means.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Sorry, can I interrupt you? Can I just mention one other point? She does make the point in her affidavit that it was not only POPs that were attending to those various incidents. There were a number of other units. We have no idea what arms they possessed, how they approached the situation at all.
The way I read her affidavit is that, just in answer to the chairman, is that the operation itself was as a consequence of the murders. It's not something that they did to contain the killings. The deaths and the murders, if one reads paragraph 7, took place before. That's the 6-month period that I'm talking about, it seems to me. Because in paragraph 7 she says between November 1997 and July 1998 there were approximately 50 murders committed in the hostel. By July, the Cleveland's hostel came to be known as the Hostel of Death. Sections of the Durban POP unit were deployed to the hospital and stationed there on a full-time basis in order to contain the violence and to prevent further murders. So it seems to me that deployment of these numbers of police was in reaction to this quite unacceptable high level of murders, of deaths that were as a consequence of the conflict.
They succeeded in bringing the death toll down significantly, rather entirely perhaps after July, by doing what's summarized in the affidavit, but it is a bit vague. But perhaps we could get the book, if it's still in print, it hasn't been sold out, and it may be helpful as an exhibit, firstly, and secondly, as I say, the POP people and the SDF people could possibly study it with profit.
I think that's a sensible suggestion, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Chairman, may I just indicate, therefore, that was as indicated in the requests for cross-examination, that was
the point, you see. Yes. And you've got the answer that you... well, you've got the answer. I don't know if it's the answer you expected, but you've got the answer from the witness. But that's where it lies at the moment. The question I want to ask you is this. This document that I donated to the SABC because they didn't have their own copy, Exhibit JJ199, it's the HQ document. I assume that you're not in a position to cross-examine on it now, are you? Am I right?
I was going to be making that request, that let me just do it mull overnight, and
well, I was going to
if there is any questions that arise.
Yes, I was going to say to you, the sensible thing probably at this stage is for us to adjourn at this point. There's no point in inserting another cross-examiner in at this point in your cross-examination. Stand down till tomorrow morning, and you can then study the document overnight and then decide whether you will ask any questions about it.
I accept that.
I understand it's not compulsory that you should ask questions.
No, indeed it is. I may or may not ask any questions emanating from the document.
And don't be under any pressure of any kind to do so. Very well then. Mr. Pofu, you, I gather, are ready, or will be ready by tomorrow. You've given a list, which we've got in the course of the afternoon, a little bit out of time, but the lateness will be condoned in the circumstances. The witness will have an opportunity to read the documents to which we refer. Most of them I see are exhibits. 2 of them will be new exhibits, so the witness will have to be given copies of those. I don't know if he has been yet. Has the witness got a list yet? Are we the only ones who've got them? In accordance with the usual practice, we're lending our copies to the police to assist them. But Colonel, you'll see there are a number of documents there which are already exhibits.
I thought they were going.
He refers firstly to documents that have already been referred to in the course of your cross-examination by others. So clearly he doesn't have to give you notice of those again. He's added new ones, which most of them, with the exception of the last two, are already exhibits. So I presume copies can be easily given to you by the attorney acting for the police. But there are two more documents which are new, and presumably you will be given copies of those before close of business this evening.
Thank you. That's what I was going to say.
Chair. And the ruling relating to the application?
That's the other point I was going to deal with. You gave us a rather comprehensive and ambitious list of topics you wanted to cover. Many of them had been covered already, and I understood that Mr. Chaskerson was going to discuss them with you. Possibly we can discuss them when we adjourn. I'm not sure that all of them should be allowed, because many of them have been covered in extenso already, but that's a matter we don't have to debate in the chamber.
Chairperson, I can assure you, I've had a discussion with Mr. Chaskerson. Those that have ostensibly been covered, I'll be covering from a completely different angle, and a narrow one at that. So it's not... I've gone through Mr. Chaskerson's cross-examination in detail, and I can assure you I won't be...
Is this an ostensible cross-examination or the actual cross-examination?
We'll see that tomorrow, Chairperson.
Now, I know it's an embarrassing question to ask and difficult sometimes to answer, but can you give us a sort of an indication as to how long you think you're likely to be? I know it depends on the length of the answers and all sorts
so
of
on,
things,
yes.
But subject to that.
Well, Chairperson,
and we're not allowing for injury time, just the normal playing time you require.
Yeah. Normal playing time, Chairperson. If I get to start in the unlikely event that Mr. Nzebeza doesn't find anything to ask, then I should finish by Monday, Chairperson.
Well, Monday, the DA is none. We're not sitting on Monday.
Oh, I thought it was Wednesday.
No, we don't sit. The chamber is not available on the first Monday and the first Wednesday and the third Wednesday of the month. We're going to approach the authorities here, the local municipal ones, to see whether they really need this room on Wednesday, because it would be useful if we could use it. But we're certainly not sitting on Monday. We are sitting tomorrow. Now, when you say you'll be finished by Monday, you mean finished by sometime on Tuesday?
Tuesday, yes. End of the day.
So you're really thinking about it, something approximating to a day and a half?
A day and a bit.
A day and a bit. Whatever bit is left to you from tomorrow, through the generosity of Mr. Nzebeza.
That's correct, Chairman.
All right, okay. So on that optimistic note, we'll adjourn until 9 o'clock tomorrow morning.
Thank you.